Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report. This is the space where we bring you Black America's headline news, views, and opinions. I'm Romeo.
Hey there, I'm Brooke. I'm Demi, and Neil is out today. Coming up for you on today's report, we have the latest from the January 6th investigative panel. Also, an Army vet risked his life to expose the Ku Klux Klan. And find out why New York State is declaring racism a public health crisis.
Also, we remember Bishop Desmond Tutu, and we also celebrate Kwanzaa.
Yes, we do. We have all that and so much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's get it.
Hey there, Soulmates. Thank you for joining us this Monday evening. The U.S. House Select Subcommittee tasked with investigating the January 6th insurrection is reportedly ramping up its efforts, signaling an intention to explore potential criminal wrongdoings by former President Donald Trump. The Hill reports the panel has said it could refer Trump to the Justice Department for prosecution if it finds damning evidence. Now, the report notes this could be seen as an open invitation to Attorney General Merrick Garland to be more aggressive toward the former president than he has been in his tenure thus far. So, according to The Hill, again, Liz Cheney, who is the Select Committee's vice chair, at a hearing earlier this month said the panel is examining whether Trump committed a crime. Cheney quoted the statutory text for a felony obstruction offense, saying, did Donald Trump, through action or inaction, corruptly seek to obstruct or impede Congress's official proceedings to count electoral votes? It appears, obviously that is the question. It's interesting, even the way that it's worded. It appears indicating potential, I'm not sure, because there's also, many political experts have said that there is no real likelihood that an incoming, a current presidency, a current administration will be, deeply trying to investigate a past one, because everyone wants to kind of follow the same rules in the club and not have something appear partisan and possibly happen to them once they're the outgoing president,
I think about the situation. We do know this. There have been charges filed to over 700 people, from the insurrection. But those are they called the foot soldiers. How do we get to the main source? How do we find out who paid for the buses, who paid for other things, the hotels, things of that nature? I do feel like we're on the clock, because if we can't get to the bottom of this by the time we get to the midterms and it flips, it goes more Republican, are they going to pursue it the same way? Or are they going to fall back? Because when I think Republicans, I think about Donald Trump and his followers. So are they going to go against the grain? So do you feel like we're on the clock to get something done within the next 9 months, maybe?
Absolutely, we're on the clock, Romeo, and I'm happy that you brought that up, because there is the clock, but I'm happy, and I want to give kudos to the committee for using all of the tools in their book to even bring this to light, because myself and a lot of other people have been wondering, how is it that he's able to just kind of breeze by? I know he's Donald Trump, and I know he has a lot of power in his community, and he has a devout following, but also it was very hard to believe that there was no one that was willing to go up against him. So I was really happy to hear this. And Brooke, back to your point, you made a really great point, the last one, about other presidents being nervous about that the same thing would happen. But really, a simple phrase is, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you really shouldn't have anything to worry about. But also, what I thought was very interesting about this was Trump wanted a lot of this information to remain private. And so he was saying, like, hey, I forgot exactly what jargon he used to try to ask for this to be private. And I love that President Joe Biden was like, actually, no, the people need to know what's going on. The people deserve transparency, and I'm happy that we're able to see this, because it just didn't make sense how everyone else was getting charged, Romeo, like you said, versus Donald Trump is just having nothing happen to him at all. It didn't make sense at all.
And I think about it, you talk about the records, the phone records, the written messages, things like that he does not want to show. That's, to me, we're in a world of red flags right now, So those are several red flags saying, what are you hiding if you don't want to show us? If you have nothing to hide, why not say, yeah, this is what we were talking about. This is what we were discussing. Why not put it out there? Then you know what? We all have to fall back and leave it alone. But that's not the case. All right, the latest revelation of the Ku Klux Klan and police forces comes from a former U.S. veteran, Joseph Moore, who helped foil at least 2 murder plots, according to court records, in nearly 10 years working undercover for the FBI as a Klansman. The FBI wrote, the white supremacist groups have historically engaged in strategic efforts to infiltrate, recruit from law and enforcement. In 2006, the FBI circulated an assessment about the Klan and other groups trying to infiltrate police forces. The assessment said some with the law enforcement community were volunteering professional resources to white supremacist causes, which they sympathize. We talk about what this man did. He's, I think, a father of 4. He's stepping out. He's going undercover. And there were times, I was reading some stuff on this, there were times where he said he would have to sit along his truck and do deep breathing techniques just to go into the situation because he feared for his life. But again, these are people that are going out saying, look, here's what's wrong. We want to expose what's going on within the white supremacists, within Ku Klux Klan, and we want to get to the bottom of this, and hopefully we can cut down on a lot of this, right, and the backlash of it.
Okay, this story was so incredibly awesome to read. I literally did a complete deep dive. Of course, we don't have enough time to go into it, but if you get a chance, what I really thought was really awesome about this guy was Romeo, like you said too, like he had such a dangerous job, and he, like you said, feared for his life. He said one misstep, that could have been it for him. Yeah. And so what I thought was so interesting that he went on record saying that although, you know, there was they tried to kill a black man, Warren Williams. And so if you soulmates, if you get a chance to look into this story, I'm telling you, it is so phenomenal, the story. So when they were trying to kill the black man, Warren Williams, he wanted to make it known that I did not agree with the KKK's racist views, and I never said any racial slurs. So that alone was just so dope to me, because he could have went along with it. He could have literally just been like, hey, I'm playing the role that I need to play right now, and I'm gonna, you know, go ahead and add in and say, you know, the N-word. But he was like letting everyone know, I did not join in on those. So I thought that was really awesome. But what was really awesome about the story about Warren Williams was how the FBI made sure they protected him, put him in witness protection. He told the story that he went to go see his parole officer the day before they tried to kill him, and so he was like, hey, you know, I just talked to my parole officer the day before. Like, why do I need to have another conversation? And his mom told him, if you didn't do anything wrong, just go talk to him. And so that's where he found out that, hey, these people are trying to kill you. We're gonna pretend that you're dead and show photos. So the guy, I forgot his name, Joseph Moore, had to go back and show the photos and pretend like he was dead. I mean, fascinating. So if you guys get a chance to just dive into this a little bit more, I promise you it'll be worthwhile. It is so great.
Yeah, I agree.
So a paramedic who is facing charges for his connection to the death of Elijah McClain has filed a court motion asking for the 11 counts against him, including charges of manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide, to be dismissed. Peter Sachuniak was one of the 2 paramedics who decided to sedate McClain with ketamine after the 23-year-old was involved in a rough police altercation during his walk home from a store in 2019. McClain later went into cardiac arrest and never regained consciousness. The 3 police officers and 2 paramedics who had direct contact with McClain prior to his death are each facing a series of charges. So, of course, we've talked about Elijah McClain lots of times on the show. This was interesting because I feel like we're at a stage in our lives in being black, honestly, right? We're at a stage in being black right now where we're not looking for just a police officer to be arrested. We need some action to happen. We need serious justice to come from some of these arrests that happen from police officers. We don't want you to just get arrested. We don't want you just getting fired. We want jail time. I know for me, I wanted to see more of actual jail time. Also, you know, what we've said before, of course, he was face down, handcuffed, face down when these paramedics did this to him, right? And so when you think about it, everybody needs to go down. No one needs to be left off of the jail records right now, because it's hard to believe that no one felt like, hey, this is going too far right now. So everyone needs to go to jail.
You know, this is a situation where, again, we wonder, you know, this man was simply walking down the street, and to say, hey, I have the right to stop you because you look suspicious. Really? I mean, how do they get to make that call, right? Because if you think about it, I could be walking home, you could be walking down the street. And if they feel like that, if they say it, we have to oblige, we have to respect that. So not knowing what's going to happen to us in the end, this man's life was lost. At the end of the day, there was a point where all this was going down, where the body cameras were turned off and you could still hear them talking, right? So there's so much suspicions around this situation where you really wonder why they had to go to this extreme and why this young man had to lose his life. It's unfortunate. And you're right. People come to me all the time and say, like, you know, you guys talk about police officers. How do you really feel about it? I have family members and friends that are police officers, right? And I got love for police officers doing the right thing. But when we have the ones that continue to do things like this, they cannot walk away with it, because what are they saying to the new guys that are coming in that are being trained possibly the same way?
Right.
How do we stop this from happening if it continues to happen within the police department? That's the question.
You know, what's interesting about this is it's not really surprising, right? It's similar to his lawyers are doing his job, right? He doesn't feel like he did anything wrong. He doesn't feel like he should go down for this. He should face charges for this. And so his lawyers are asking for a dismissal. That's no different than what we've seen in many of these cases where officials or police officers, it is very rare to see a paramedic charged, right? But where you see someone charged with the death of a person either during in some sort of a detainment, right? And so I'm not surprised at this step. It's also similar to what we see afterwards, right? The officer involved, the only officer charged in Breonna Taylor's death, who wasn't even technically charged directly in her death, but specifically charged for putting neighbors at risk because of shooting, I believe, through the wall, right? That officer out, you know, talking about very famously in Vice a couple weeks ago, talking about how hard this has been on his life. Former officer Darren Wilson, obviously from Ferguson, big New Yorker article about how hard the aftermath of this has been on his life. Officers repeatedly come and try to find their jobs back. And I'm talking about try to get their jobs back, right? Try to go through a long process to be able to get their jobs back. Saying that they didn't deserve to be fired. And these are officers who don't even face charges, right? And so I'm saying officer because, again, it's rare that we see a paramedic charged. But in this case, paramedics have been charged. And I think we're seeing the normal, I think, you know, way that people move through the system in this way play out.
You know, even though paramedics are nowhere near in the system, I guess, is important, you would say, not important, I don't know, whatever, as a police officer. They're on two playing fields here. But the reality of it is that when a police officer comes out to deal with a person that needs paramedic care, you then become a team. And so the police officers and the paramedics are a team that both either do one of two things, either make sure the person goes to the hospital or they need to go to jail, right? And so at the end of the day, both teams need to hold each other liable. And so in this case, we're seeing this where they are going to be liable because both made sure that this young man did not go home to see his family.
That's true. All right, Texas board that had unanimously supported a posthumous pardon for George Floyd over a 2004 drug arrest in Houston backpedaled in an announcement Thursday saying procedural errors were found in the recommendation months after leaving the decision to Republican Governor Greg Abbott. The unusual reversal was announced by Abbott's office 2 days before Christmas, around the time he typically doles out his annual pardons. When we think about who hands it was going to, are we surprised of the outcome? I think that's the question. But the board did say that they had withdrawn 25 clemency recommendations that contained procedural errors and lack of compliance with board rules. Right? Among the recommendations withdrawn, one concern was George Floyd, but they're claiming it never even got to him because it was already denied. Are we surprised? One. Two, you know, when I read this story, it doesn't bring George Floyd back. It doesn't bring back the fact that what we all saw happen on that day that was so devastating to just us as black people, to people of color, to the world, right?
Right.
So I don't know how I really feel about this. Again, like, I wanted this to be done. People were making stories like this is going to happen. This should be the right thing to do, but it doesn't bring them back, and I'm not surprised.
It's just interesting that this is all coming down to a procedural error, and so the governor is ending the year and not going to officially pardon someone. You know, the procedural process aside, the conversation from elected officials had been, hey, there was a dirty officer involved in this, an officer facing reprimand and punishment in all of these other incidents, and we believe this was dirty. The facts say this was unfair. The facts say this wasn't correct. And on top of that, this man actually served time based on something that we believe was an injustice. And at the end of the year, for it to come down to a procedure, I think a lot of people are going to be frustrated by that. And then also, you know, on one hand, I can completely understand someone saying, hey, it doesn't even matter. But on the other hand, it does matter to his child, to his family, and also to start it back up again, there's more taxpayer dollars being. I would like to know more about what procedural error holds strong, and what can be done to make it so procedures and certain, you know, official processes and paperwork don't, you know, stop an injustice from being corrected in the future? How does that get fixed? I don't know. This is just, I just feel like I want to know more about what went on here.
Yeah, Brooke, I mean, so many great points. We don't even need to touch because you hit every single point wonderfully. But just to add on one more piece here is that the family deserves this. More, like you said, the family deserves it, and they wanted this for him. And so it should, honestly, after that, what the family wants, the family should have gotten this, and it would have made them feel so good, especially going into the holidays, going into a new year to kind of close that chapter. But also, procedural errors to me really just means, Romeo and Brooke, that he was never going to sign it. He never had any intention in signing it, and so he made sure it magically disappeared before he had to be the bad guy. So he gets to say, oh, just, my board said that they didn't want to do it, so I'm just going to go with what the board says. But the reality of it is he was never going to sign this, and so he didn't want to be the bad guy because he already knows that people already don't like him right now. And so instead of taking the fall and saying, you know what, I don't want to sign this right now for whatever reason, they came up with this procedural errors, and he blames it on the board, and we can't blame it on one person because it was 26 people. So no one is to blame, and so it just vanishes and magically disappears. But he was never going to sign it in the first place, I believe.
Let's move on from Texas to New York. So last Thursday, New York Governor Kathy Hochul actually signed a measure into law classifying racism as a public health crisis. As Bloomberg reports, the governor actually signed a series of bills into law, all meant to combat discrimination and racism. The report notes many of the bills are targeted at the inequities in New York's healthcare system, which were highlighted during the pandemic, including a measure to assess medical racism impacting newborns and their mothers. And so we talk about the disparity at the maternal mortality rate, the black women compared to their white counterparts, right? Black mothers, and how striking that disparity is overall. It is the highest in New York. Mm-hmm. The maternal mortality rate is, black women are 8 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related cause than white mothers in the state of New York. Again, the highest rate in the United States. These numbers also coming in from Bloomberg. That's striking and also scary. And when it comes to family planning, when it comes to different decisions that you make, that's scary. Mm-hmm. That number is terrifying.
Absolutely. And every time we talk about the mortality rate, Brooke, it is something to me as a woman that is just, as a black woman, moreover, that is, like you said, scary, shocking, all of those words. And also, at first when I read this, I was just like, it sounds a little performative, like black people, I'm looking out for black people. But then when I really did a deep dive, I said, this is actually really awesome. Also in New York, hate crimes are up 100%. Also, there's been a 361% in anti-Asian hate crimes in New York as well. So this is touching on a lot of different things. And so when I read that there's 2 goals for this overall, for the people like myself who are kind of like, okay, sis, like what, where are you really trying to help us out? The goal is to compel organizations and governmental agencies to focus on systemic solutions. And so this can be performative. It still can be performative if no systemic solutions are done, no resources are put, no money, putting their money where their mouth is. So this is a great blanket statement to say, to make us be like, okay, great, you're looking out for us, but at the end of the day, it still can be performative in my heart here if no resources, money, and real change happens as a result of her doing this.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely going to take all that. Look, racism has been a problem all our lives. Let's just face that, right? Whether it's at a high level or a low level, but this brings attention to it. This brings it to the forefront where we can talk about it. Hopefully in New York, they can find better ways to handle it, to approach it, to make things safer for people within that state and across the country.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like I said, this is something we've been dealing with for all of our lives for a very long time. We feel like it's hit peaks in the last couple of years due to certain things, and we can only hope that it does get better with something like this.
Mm-hmm. Definitely a step in the right direction. Now, Soulmates, coming up, a McDonald's has to pay a black store owner $33.5 million to end a racial bias suit. We have those details coming up after the break on Fox Soul's Black Report.